The year is 2021. The Marvel Cinematic Universe, aka the biggest franchise in movie history, had just taken an entire year off for reasons that not too many people knew about. Now, for most franchises, this would actually be completely normal, but for Marvel, which had been putting out like 2, 3, sometimes even 4 movies a year, this was definitely weird. So it's pretty safe to say Marvel fans were desperate for content, which completely explains why there was so much hype for WandaVision, which would be releasing later that year. Me personally, I thought it looked like the stupidest thing ever. I thought it was really dumb that they were doing like 2 Avengers in a sitcom for some reason. I thought, why are they doing that? But of course, the series absolutely blew up the internet, and people were talking about how addicting it was and how good it was, so I eventually checked it out like 6, 7 episodes in. Honestly, I did understand the hype. Like, first of all, it is just a legitimately funny sitcom, so of course it gets points there, but it's so intriguing. Like, every single episode would have these little, like, hints into what was actually going on. So it did what every good series should do, and that's, have me hooked throughout the entire run. Now, sure, the finale kind of sucked, but the show did exactly what Marvel needed it to do, and that is justifying the MCU's existence on Disney+. There is no conceptual way that WandaVision could have worked as a film. It relies on being a TV show to tell its story. At a time when the film industry was in a really bad state, Disney+ seemed like the MCU's savior. But now it seems like it's the very thing that's actually killing the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So Phase 5 of the MCU has begun with Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, and a lot of people have been looking back at Phase 4 and realizing that honestly it wasn't so great. And that's not to say that Phase 4 was bad by any means. I absolutely loved Spider-Man No Way Home and Moon Knight. I really enjoyed a number of other projects, but we used to be at a state where the MCU was at least consistently good, and now it seems to just be consistently mediocre. Not to mention the fact that there were actually just multiple projects that were just flat out terrible. And a lot of people have complained about those projects in Phase 4 as a whole, but something I wish I'd hear more people talk about is the reason the MCU has declined, and it's because there is simply too much content. Marvel used to be at a stage where it would release, 2, 3, sometimes 4 movies a year. And although I've never been a huge fan of that because I think it makes a franchise overall feel less special, I've always understood why. There is no way they devote an entire year to Infinity War, then devote an entire year to Ant-Man and the Wasp, then devote an entire year to Captain Marvel, and then finally devote an entire year to Avengers Endgame. Like, there's no way they do that. Now, ever since 2021, they've been releasing 8 to 9 projects a year. There is not one single movie franchise on this planet that would be able to consistently release 8 to 9 good projects a year. Also, it's a lot harder to see the cohesive vision of the MCU when you have that many projects. Phase 4 felt like a lot of just throwing stuff at the wall to see what would stick. And when you have someone like Kevin Feige overseeing all this stuff, it's a lot harder to make sure all of it's, watchable when he has to oversee 8 to 9 projects a year. On a pretty consistent basis now, fans seem to be disappointed with the overall quality of the storytelling of what we're getting from the MCU, whether it be a movie or a TV show. There are a lot of the new shows, unlike WandaVision, that actually feel like movies that are just being stretched out into 6-episode miniseries. They keep hyping up a lot of the films like they're going to have these big, huge implications on the next Avengers movie, when in actuality they're not really having much of an impact on anything at all. But not only that, but we used to be at a point where you could basically go into any Marvel movie ever and you could still understand what was going on and you could still have a good time watching it. But when Doctor Strange: The Multiverse of Madness came out, a lot of people were extremely confused on what was going on with Wanda and her kids, because not everybody who went to that movie had necessarily seen the WandaVision show. And not only that, but the lore seems to be affected by this too. It seems like every time there's a new multiverse movie, it seems to contradict the previous multiverse movie. Like, apparently Loki is the show that's opened the multiverse, that spawned the multiverse, and then we learn from No Way Home that we have Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man coming in and Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man coming in. So how did their universes spawn from the 616 timeline? Did someone move a chair and suddenly the only superhumans that existed were Spider-Man characters? And Spider-Man looks different? Like, I have no idea how that's possible. And then we have Multiverse of Madness, where there is, universes made of rocks and lava and paint. How did that spawn from 616? And then we have incursions happening when Doctor Strange is in, like, a universe for, 20 minutes, where we had all the Spider-Man villains coming in No Way Home for almost an hour at least, and there was not an incursion. Like, it is consistently more and more messy, and that is turning off moviegoers because it's just consistently confusing everybody. Not only that, but Marvel's CGI has seen a pretty significant decline as well. Like, I'm not going to say Marvel CGI suddenly sucks now like some people, but there are some certain horrendous shots where I completely understand why people think that their VFX overall suck now. But no, there are some great VFX in certain projects, but I will say overall it definitely looks way more cartoony than it used to. And it gets even worse when you actually hear about the Marvel VFX workers who've actually come out and talked about that they are just overworked and the working conditions are really bad, and that just makes you absolutely feel horrible. So overall, Marvel is declining in storytelling, its cohesiveness, as well as its VFX, due to way too many projects being produced a year. So how exactly do we fix this? Well, I actually think Disney right now is working on fixing the problem. Disney CEO Bob Iger has talked about that they actually want to consistently be doing less Marvel projects now. When it comes to Disney Plus, both the Ironheart show and the Echo show have been delayed until next year. The movie The Marvels, which was supposed to come out in July, just 2 months after Guardians of the Galaxy 3, is now coming out in the November period. Disney Plus seems to heavily rely on their Star Wars and Marvel content, and while that leads to them having much more consistently successful shows than, let's say, Netflix, that still means there's a lack of originality in Disney Plus content. It's mainly just the big Star Wars and Marvel franchises that are basically carrying that streaming service into being the insanely successful streaming service that it is. But I actually think it could benefit even more from actually just doing more original content, because not only would that benefit Disney Plus, but that would actually benefit the MCU and even Star Wars as well, which has also been pushing out consistently mediocre content, which kind of sucks because Star Wars is my favorite franchise of all time. It seems like Marvel's rushing towards a deadline here, and I'm not exactly sure why. Like, they need Avengers: The Kang Dynasty to be in 2025. Like, sure, I want to see the next Avengers movie as much as the next person, but it took 10 years to get to Infinity War. Like, you guys have time. So in other words, I think that right now, MCU may be declining in a few areas, but I think it's just a very temporary decline, and I think they are fixing the problem right now. And I think a year from now, things are absolutely just going to be just fine. I think in any cinematic universe, taking your time is essential. That's the reason the Marvel Cinematic Universe is so huge, is because it took its time to get where it is today. Honestly, I'd be fine with the next Avengers movie coming out in maybe even like 2027 if it meant that the payoffs are actually set up properly, because that is essential in any cinematic universe. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more content like this, make sure to subscribe to the channel and drop a like on this video. Let me know in the comments what you think, and I'll see you in the next one.